right. So I think today our agenda, we will have a rather short call in general, I believe, but we wanted to share some important information with everyone related to advocating locally for school COVID safety policies. And so we were going to just briefly review a toolkit with everyone related to that topic. And then Tiffany Gladney, who is NC Child's policy director, was going to provide us with a short legislative update. And then we will finish up with any announcements and adjourn. As always, we encourage you to ask questions in the chat if you have those, and we will do our best to answer them. So in just a minute here, I am going to get us started by sharing our toolkit that we have pulled together from NC Child that talks about a few hot topics and items related to school COVID safety. But before I get into the details of that, I wanted to just allow Michelle Hughes, our executive director, a quick opportunity to share some news with everyone about a child advocate here in North Carolina and talk to you all about that. Michelle.
Sure. Just wanted to let folks know, particularly folks that have been in North Carolina doing work in children's advocacy for a long time, that the founding director really of NC Child, but the North Carolina Child Advocacy Institute, John Niblock, has passed away. So many of you, or some of you maybe, remember John started his child advocacy career. He was in 1977. He was appointed by Governor Hunt to the governor's Council on Children and Youth Advocacy, and recognizing the importance of speaking up for children, but also recognizing after 7 years the challenges of trying to do that within state government. John and other child advocates created in 1983, founded the North Carolina Child Advocacy Institute, which, as you all know, eventually over time and many name changes became NC Child. So I just want to take a moment to recognize the contribution and the legacy of John. We're here today because he had the vision too, and he was a really wonderful man. So he had a tremendous vision, and we are still carrying it out today. And so I just want to take a second to remember him, think of his wife, Pam, and their family. And at this time, we're a sad loss for them, but we are grateful to be able to carry on the work that he started in 1983. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Michelle. And my understanding is this Sunday, the obituary will appear in the Raleigh News and Observer, and encourage folks to look out for that, and we'll try to share that around as well. All right, so there certainly is a plethora of issues that are going on across the board, you know, at the state level, at the federal level, and at the local level. School boards have really become a focal point around advocacy during these times on various issues that parents and families feel really passionately about. We wanted to talk a little more about some avenues for advocacy that we think may be helpful, and that we hope and encourage all of you all to sort of spread with your communities, within your networks, to put some ideas out there around how we can effectively advocate to make our schools as safe as possible for all children across the board here in North Carolina. And just to level set on this first, in North Carolina, we have 150 school districts. So a lot of them are by county. Some are sort of combo city-county school districts. We have some smaller school districts within counties and things. We have a total of 115. And essentially all 115 of those bodies are their own governing entities, and they help set the agenda and decide what are the budgets for our schools, what are the other health-related policies and things, the educational policies that affect our children. Of course, there's a lot of state-level policy and federal policy that plays into that, but school boards have a tremendous amount of power and a tremendous and we have tremendous opportunities to advocate with those school board members around things that we want to see for our children in schools. And so the COVID relief funding has come down the line in various waves over the past year and a half or so now. There was the CARES Act passed way back when. There was another batch of federal funding that came down the line. Most recently, of course, there was the huge American Rescue Plan Act funding. All of these have an impact on our schools and are providing funding for our schools to try to stop the learning loss that has occurred due to COVID-19 pandemic, and to also make our schools as safe as possible for our children to learn in. And just recently, I believe last Friday or the sometime earlier in September, the U.S. Department of Education kind of gave the final go-ahead to release the last wave of ARPA related to funds, this huge batch of money that various schools can take advantage of in North Carolina. Those are called ESSER funds, ESSER. And so a lot of times you'll see those acronyms, ARPA and ESSER, used kind of in conjunction with one another. But the bottom line is that the vast majority of these billions of dollars in total for North Carolina schools that have come down the line have not been allocated as of yet. And we as advocates have a wonderful opportunity to go and talk to our school board members, other local elected leaders about the urgency of using these funds and how we want those funds to be used. I think some of this certainly came to the forefront for us even more over the past couple of weeks when you hear about all of these efforts that parents are undertaking to essentially fund air purifiers, other sort of ventilation things, outdoor seating options, all this kind of stuff that quite frankly concerned parents are coming together and kind of just fundraising for, doing GoFundMes or what have you, so that because they feel the urgency and the need. Of course, that begs the question, why does this have to be done in that way versus being allocated through a public process where there are these funds available? And it most certainly brings to mind the equity issues that are involved in such type efforts, where, of course, there are some school districts and parents and classrooms that are not going to be able to do those same type of fundraising activities to make sure that our children are as safe as possible. So this is an opportunity for us to go in with an equitable framework and talk to the policy-making authority at the local level, our school districts, about what can be done to enact some safe policies. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and share our toolkit here and just go over a few things briefly. And then if folks have any questions or comments, and as I'm doing that, if anyone has anything else to add, feel free. Oh, Fawn, I think I'll need co-host ability to share my screen.
Okay, I'm doing that. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to drop the link right into the chat so that folks can grab that themselves too. Let's see. It's not letting me do that. Do you want me to share my screen, Adam?
Sure, that would be wonderful.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh.
You should be able to share then, Adam.
All right.
Thanks.
There
Eva.
we go. Thanks, Eva. So this toolkit, which Fawn has dropped is dropping the link into the chat so that you can all link to it. And this was also linked on a blog that we released this week related to this topic. Just has some basic tips in it. And again, we encourage you to share these with other advocates in your community, on parent Facebook groups, wherever the case may be, to spread the word. So the first thing that we want to put in this toolkit, which of course is a basic thing, is understanding who represents you on the local school board. Any voter can go to the North Carolina Board of Elections website and type in your information and find out who represents you at all levels of government. School board members are elected officials in the vast majority of cases across North Carolina. Asheville-Buncombe, I think, appoints their school board members. I don't know of any other place that does. Maybe somebody on this call does. But for the most part, they are elected officials. And oftentimes they can be elected different ways. You might have them elected by districts. They might all be elected at large. There might be a combination thereof, like we have here with Durham Public Schools. So you need to do a little bit of homework to find out who your elected school board members are. And those should be the first points of focus for any type of advocacy that you're doing, because they should be responsive to your needs. So make sure that you're contacting the correct school board members, those that represent you. And it's always a good idea, if you can, to send a copy of the message to the superintendent. The school superintendent is the one that is really in charge, obviously, in the day-to-day operations of the school. And so it's not a bad idea to let them know what's on your mind as well. You can find their contact information. Most of the time, you can just go to your local school board website, and they will have a link on there to who your elected Board of Education members are. That's public record, and they have to have that stuff publicly available. Some are easier to find than others, but you can always just do a good old Google search for the public schools Board of Ed members that you're looking for, and that usually will turn up what you need. Your school board members are volunteers, or they're paid very little for the vast amount of work that they are asked to do as a school board member, and they are trying to grapple with all kinds of issues. And so I think just having that in mind as we're contacting them with our issues, and staying direct and to the point, and being very clear in what our ask is, we're oftentimes talking about our ask, is something that can be very helpful. We have then provided here a sample letter that has some goals, some stated language of some things that we think are good for children to help keep them safe during this pandemic, and things that funds can be used to help supplement. So the 4 ideas that we have put down here, and of course, if you take this letter, you can modify it to your personal needs or some of your priorities. One is making it easier to eat outside. There's a lot of local school boards that are now making it a policy that if at all possible, weather permitting, if a child doesn't have allergies that are going to be triggered too badly, or other medical needs, that children would be eating outside. That's happening more and more. So it's an opportunity for us to talk about, well, what's needed for them to eat outside in a safe manner, socially distanced, with some decent facilities, buying things like picnic tables, tents, shelters. Those type things are all permissible uses of ARPA funds. And the thing is that these type structures can also be used for outside learning. And that's a goal that a lot of school districts have anyways, is trying to increase opportunities for outdoor learning as they move forward in their strategic plans. So that's something that's really good. Purchasing air purifiers for classrooms. There continues to be data and information out there. There was a letter from a group of engineers from NC State earlier, about a week ago, I believe, that talked about the data that's there, that's saying that air purifiers are helpful in moving air through and having good ventilation. 2 and 3 really go hand in hand. So buying air purifiers and updating ventilation and HVAC systems are something that's also hugely important in having safe and healthy schools. And the truth of the matter is, with number 3, upgrading ventilation, I think any school district probably is going to tell you this is a huge need, and oftentimes they are behind in the capital investments they've been able to make in order to do the upgrades that they need to keep up with not only new schools that are being built, obviously, but old structures where these type upgrades have to be done. I know in Durham, for example, Durham Public Schools spent all summer going through and doing a tremendous amount of work trying to upgrade these ventilation systems, cleaning them, doing a lot of things. It's a lot of work, and funds are certainly needed for it. And then last but not least on our short list of suggestions is this idea of hiring and retaining more school nurses. We are in support at NC Child of of increasing the ratios for all of our school professionals that are needed, counselors, psychologists, nurses, social workers, et cetera, as well as paying teachers what they're worth and paying other staff, bus drivers and cafeteria workers and janitorial staff. But we really think that hiring and retaining the school nurses, where there's oftentimes a tremendous need, can really go a long way in helping to address the physical and mental health of students. And so we are really encouraging school boards, if they can, to think creatively around this, work with their local county commissioners, think of ways to utilize this funding that's out there to have a transformative type change to hire and retain more school nurses and get their school districts on the path of having that be a more sustained, effective part of the education of our children. So those are all just suggestions that we put in there. In addition to this, you all perhaps may be aware that there was a piece of legislation passed this summer that says that all school boards must meet monthly to reevaluate and vote on what their mask policies are in schools. So that means on a monthly basis, all these school districts are having to revisit and either reaffirm if they're going to keep masks as a requirement or change that requirement or what have you. And we continue to advocate for masking in schools. There's tremendous amount of science out there that shows that it's an effective way to mitigate the transmission of COVID. And we wanted to, of course, include this sample letter that we have shared before. And NC Child has done a lot of advocacy on this issue with local school boards to make sure that stays in folks' minds, as again, on a monthly basis, school boards are getting an earful about this. We've been hearing the North Carolina School Boards Association has really voiced a lot of concerns that they're getting from school board members due to the tenor and quite frankly, sort of the bullying type aspects of behavior that are coming from parents at various school board meetings. That's really not a good example to show our children, not safe, and is really unfair in a lot of ways to school board members that are trying to do the best they can to keep our children safe. The governor addressed this last week as well. But with this happening on a monthly basis in all these school districts, this discussion coming up again and again and again, we need to stand strong as advocates to maintain these type requirements as long as we feel like it's the safe and it's the right thing to do. And the good news is that the vast majority, Fawn, you may know the number, I think it's like 112 out of 115 of the districts have mask mandates now.
Yeah, that's about right. I think one flipped back, Harnett County flipped back to reverse their mandate, but you're going to see that happening every month. So this, as Adam said, it is really important. And the dynamics have really changed at local school boards recently. I wanted to point out a comment from Lori around who has power in these school board discussions. And I agree with in a lot of rural districts, you really have the superintendent calling the shots and school board members kind of just rubber stamping recommendations. And we saw that early on with these school safety measures. However, since it's become more politicized, you're seeing superintendents recommending stronger measures and school board members overturning that, voting against it or going against their superintendent. So it has become much more of a heated discussion. And I think Tina's sharing that Pender is going to optional masks on October 4th. So being a voice that's grounded in evidence and science and that is helpful to your school board members is more important now than ever if you are involved in your local school district. So we want to encourage you to do that and let us know if these resources are helpful or if there's other things we can help connect you with.
Yeah, and I think just the last thing I would say, looping back around to some of the other issues, is us really pressing the voice for equity of, okay, what's going on with the air quality in all of our classrooms. What's good for one school needs to be good for the other school. And if we're seeing those inequalities play out, we've got this tremendous amount of money, these tremendous amount of funds that school boards have to allocate to remedy this and do something that is helpful for all of our students. And the time is now and the urgency is now. And so it's up to us in a lot of ways to have that voice heard and to talk to others in our community. I mean, there's a lot of details here. Everybody's got busy lives. I think a lot of people don't even know, like, oh, there's these funds out here that could buy air purifiers for certain classrooms, and how could that work? So if we're able to share that information, then we're giving people the information they need to go in and maybe advocate with a more solid voice to help make some of this happen. So with that, I will stop rambling, and I am happy to, we can have discussion or address any other questions.
I just want to point out that Caitlin Hall had asked about whether these ARP ESSER funds were available for childcare centers as well, or just for K-12. My understanding is ESSER funds are just K-12. Is that correct?
And I guess the pre-K that is available and in public school settings, that I'm not positive about that, but I believe that's the case, Fawn. Hopefully there are other funds out there that could be used perhaps for childcare centers that aren't ESSER funds necessarily, but that are coming through the county or city tranches of money that could be an advocacy ask as well.
Correct. And if you want more help with that, need to get in touch with more resources about county ARPA dollars, Adam is also your go-to on that. So we've got a whole ARPA toolkit on our website that you can use if you're involved with childcare centers or other institutions and want to advocate for those funds at your county and city level as well. And Elizabeth Byram is on the line mentioning childcare stabilization grants that are available. So Elizabeth, do you want to jump on and mention that real fast?
Absolutely. I'm joining from my phone. Just sorry not to be on video, but want to make sure folks have the most recent information that some of the advocates just found out about. But the stabilization grant program is specifically for childcare programs, and that is also ARPA dollars. And we have received word that the process for applying for those funds is going to officially roll out in October. So that's great news. We actually have some information, I think Fawn can hopefully share it out in our written update about some of the upcoming technical assistance opportunities for providers as they have to fill out the application. So those are going to start in like 2 weeks, different webinars that the Division for Child Development is hosting. But so far they've shared a couple ideas for what these funds can be used for. So I'll share those now, and happy to take any additional questions that we can actually share with the division if you all have them. But those funds can be used for facility improvements, for maintenance, for PPE. So it sounds like they could be used to do some of these same items that we've been talking about for childcare. There's going to be some benefits, particularly specifically for staff and educators. So these funds can be used for compensation. They can also be used for mental health support for staff and children, as well as fixed costs like rent, mortgage, utilities. So it's a pretty broad bucket of items that these funds can be used for. And so hopefully some of these same safety measures can be put into childcare programs. But we'll share the information about the upcoming webinars. And if you have specific other questions, I'm still learning alongside you, but I'm happy to take any questions now or at the end.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right. So if we have no other questions related to that, thanks everyone again. And please, take a look at the toolkit, share with others in your community, and let us know if you have any questions. With that, I am going to turn it over to our policy director, Tiffany Gladney.
Happy Friday, y'all. So let's talk about what's going on Jones Street this week. So the timeline for the state budget has been pushed back again. So Senator Phil Berger anticipates sending a House and Senate agreement to the governor for his review and feedback next week, with a hopeful deadline of budget passage sometime in October. When in October? But this is the timeline as of this week. And of course, redistricting hearings are continuing, as well as several legislators have announced their impending retirements within the past few weeks. So the legislative committee has really been at a minimum. But of course, if you're curious about what we've been working or tracking or oppose even, you can always access our legislative tracker that gives up-to-date real-time updates. And when we send out the written update, you'll also find some redistricting tools and resources and information that you can access if you want to learn more about the process. So on the federal side, the North Carolina General Assembly is not the only body dealing with some rapid approaching deadlines. So Congress continues to debate the Build Back Better reconciliation package, as well as have to address the deadline for the nation's debt, which is usually resolved by raising the debt ceiling. However, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has stated that his caucus will not vote in favor of increasing the debt ceiling. So failing to raise the debt ceiling would not only cause the nation to default on its debts, but it could also lead to a government shutdown. So on the reconciliation package forefront, President Biden earlier this week convened the various groups of the House and Senate Democratic Party who are still at an impasse on the spending amounts and also allocations for the reconciliation package, as well as his signature infrastructure package. So Senate Majority Leader Schumer and House Speaker Pelosi announced an agreement on Thursday and hope that they can still vote on a full package by September 30th. So stay tuned. And also you'll find more details about the agreement that Schumer and Pelosi announced in the written update. So with that, Adam, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. We have any questions, comments related to that?
Not seeing anything popping up in the chat.
Okay. Do we have any announcements that anyone would like to make?
While we're waiting to see if anybody has an announcement to share, either in the chat or just unmute and share, just want to let folks know we do not have a live meeting scheduled for next week as of right now. As you can guess from Tiffany's update, state legislative activity is kind of outside the budget chamber, pretty minimal right now, and we don't know when we're going to see any kind of budget proposal that we can look at and discuss. So until that happens, we're going to take a break from the live updates. When we see some kind of budget on paper, then we'll get back together and pick it apart and answer questions and cry or celebrate or whatever needs to happen with that. But until then, we are going to pause live updates for a while. So letting you know you can get some time back on Fridays. We'll still send a written update as long as there's something to report on.
So now instead of wearing a tie 45 minutes a week, I'll be wearing a tie none of the week. All right. So hearing no announcements, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing and talking with you